Okay, class, good day. So let us continue our discussion on international business and trade. In particular, let us discuss more about trade, world trade, and globalization. So we weren't able to dwell into this topic in depth last meeting. So today, hopefully, we get a better understanding of trade, international trade, and of course, globalization. So we have mentioned before that an open economy actually means more opportunities for a country and its people. And why is that so? No? An open economy actually means there is free trade. In other words, it's much easier to trade worldwide, no, between countries. So export and import transactions are now much easier. And this is because of the lifting of barriers to trade. So, for example, the elimination of tariffs or other barriers, other hindrances to the exchange of goods and services. So that means it's much easier to do business. So if it's much easier to do business, this means plenty of opportunities, not only for the business, but also to the employees, also to the workers, and also to the society. So this will create jobs. Since there is more trade, there is an opportunity for businesses to grow and expand. And when they do, they will be hiring more people. So if people have jobs, they have a chance to elevate their standard of living. Okay, so this is why an open economy is actually encouraged today, no, by many states, no, many countries actually support world trade. Okay, so what is the situation of trade in our region? So perhaps this graph can give you an idea. So Asian trade growth is rising. Let me just expand this for a moment. Okay, so hopefully you can see better. Okay, so we have two graphs. Let's focus on the left bar graph. Okay, so we see that this bar graph actually represents the percent of contribution of Asian trade to total world trade. Okay, so the contribution of trade, no, of Asia. So that includes our country. We are contributing to total world trade. So the trend is, you see that it's going up. So we have an ever increasing trade transaction, trade contribution worldwide. So that's a very good sign of development in our region, also in our country. And here, the right bar graph represents or displays the percent of the contribution of Asia, the Asian region, to world total GDP. And you will see that we contribute a lot to total GDP worldwide, no? And it's ever increasing since the 1970s. In fact, the projection here is that Asia will continue to be a major part of world trade. The forecast here is up to the year 2030. So these are projections that are very good because that means there will be a lot of economic activity in our region. So our country will benefit. Now, speaking of our country, let's find out the situation of our country with regards to trading, with regards to the exchange of goods and services. So let's look at the next slide. So I have a graph here, a bar chart again that actually displays the export and import transactions of the Philippines. As of 2019, last year, and April 2020 last year. So let's look at these bars over here, and you will see that it represents total trade. So the blue bars represent 2019 transactions, and the yellow bars represent 2020 transactions. And you will see that total trade for 2019 is very high, 15.1 as of in millions of dollars. And by April 2020, last year, it went down to 6.066. So it went down, no? So there's a decrease in total trade. Let's jump to this part here, and you will see that our imports also fell. So April 2019, it was 9.45. And then by 2020, last year, it was down to 3.28. Okay? So we experience again a decrease or a fall on imports. And what do you think is the cause of this? Correct. It's because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Of course, the pandemic caused a lot of economic stagnation. And our economy, the Philippine economy, grinded to a halt. So there was no business transactions, there was no trade, the flow of goods and commodities was hampered. So imports were low, no? So imports were low because nobody's buying, di ba? Bakit ka naman mag-i-import? Wala namang bumibili. Oh, di ba? Okay, so total trade went down. Also, our exports went down. So you see, 2019 we had 5.65, went down to 2.78 last year. So exports also went down, no? Okay, now let's look at the graph, the bars here, and you will see it's actually below the x-axis, no? So this represents a negative, no? It represents a negative. These bars actually represent a negative balance of trade. So it's a negative balance of trade. So if it's a positive balance of trade, it should be above the x-axis. Now, why do we call it a negative balance of trade? Actually, we'll be discussing this later on, no? But might as well give you an idea what it means. So ideally, when we say balance of trade, we are talking about comparing imports and exports. So ideally, ano bang mas maganda? What do you think a country prefers? More exports or more imports? Correct. Ideally, we want more exports. Why? Of course, you know this because you're accountants, you know. It's like, the cash flow statement. The cash flow statement displays or will tell you whether you have a positive cash flow. That means you have money coming in, you have more money coming in than a negative cash flow, no, in comparison to money coming out. So when you are exporting, you are actually having money coming in. So it's cash in, no? It's an inflow of cash when you're exporting because you're selling goods and commodities. Okay. And then if it's negative, that means you have more imports because you spent money. No, the country spent money, no, by bringing these imports. That's money going out. So money went out when you imported. Okay. Now the difference between exports and imports, no, is displayed as a is represented as the balance of trade. No, if there are more imports, that means we have a negative balance of trade because there was more money coming out of the economy because we imported more goods. Okay, so here we're looking at a negative balance of trade for the Philippines. Okay, so we are more import oriented. We import a lot. Okay. Now that doesn't necessarily mean that's bad for the economy. In fact, a lot of countries have a negative balance of trade. Okay, this is just one indicator of economic performance, but we will go into that later. Now, what it really means when we have a balance of trade, and what's the effect of this in the economy. Okay, so this is just one indicator, one small picture of what is happening in our country's economy. Okay, so that's it now. So what do we export? The Philippines exports a lot of electronic products, also machinery and transportation equipment. Cars, no? Uh, well, not really cars, no? Probably, some parts of automobiles, I guess, no? Or machineries related to the manufacturing of transportation equipment. Yan. Okay. We also sell a lot of bananas. Yan. Okay. Now, what do we import? So we import a lot of raw materials. Okay. So raw materials for manufacturing finished goods. Also capital goods. This can be heavy equipment. So these are goods that can produce other goods. Okay. Yeah. So that is what we import, no, from other countries. Okay. Now, what is international trade? This is our textbook definition of international trade. It is the exchange of capital, goods, and services across international borders or territories. So we are engaging in looking outside of our territory, outside of our geographic limitations, and we want to sell outside offshore. Okay, so we want to sell goods and services. Of course, this includes capital. No? Capital is actually money. Okay, so international trade will also involve money coming in and out of an economy. Okay. So it involves activities of the government and also individuals, no, in businesses. And trade represents a significant share of gross domestic product. So in fact, trade, or the balance of trade, is actually a part of the formula for GDP, which again we will be learning later, no, when we discuss the balance of trade. Okay. And also the balance of payments, no, we will be discussing that also later. Okay. Now, what is the importance of international trade? Why is it important? Okay. So these are the reasons why international trade is very vital to our economy. Number one, it paves the way for globalization. Now, we always hear the term globalization. Okay. What is globalization? Okay. Most of the time, we actually refer to globalization as trade itself. No? the the exchange of products, goods, services. But globalization is unique, no? It's a modern terminology that refers to exchange of goods and services. So before moving forward, let me just describe or define globalization for you. So globalization is the spread of products, technology, information, and opportunities across national borders and cultures. Okay. So it's the spread of products, technology, information across national borders and cultures. Well, it's like the defined definition of international trade, right? However, it has one very unique characteristic, and that is actually the speed at which the spread of products, technology, information occurs across all over the world. Okay, and this was brought about by advancement in technology, advancement in communication. Globalization is not new, in fact. Globalization, if we are thinking about the term as the exchange of goods and services, it's nothing. It's nothing new. Okay? It's been occurring since ancient times, since Roman times. Uh, Nations have been trading with each other already. However, before it was very slow and cumbersome. Of course, they do not have the internet before. They did not have the internet before. Okay, but right now we have this advantage. That's why it's so quick, differentiated from the our understanding of international trade. It is a quite unique phenomenon because it includes advancement of technology and transportation and communication. Okay, so let me go back to that slide, previous slide, and continue with the importance of international trade. Okay, number two, it provides goods and services. That's correct, no? Because of international trade, we now have more goods and services in the market, so we now have more choices. Okay, so previously our products were practically limited because we were so dependent on what the local market can provide. But because of globalization, because of countries now can easily exchange goods and services, no? There is the lifting of tariffs and trade barriers. They can easily come into our country. That means more products coming in. So we have so many goods and services, so many choices, thanks to international trade. And number three, it provides employment. Of course, I have discussed this already earlier, since an open economy provides opportunities. Okay, so it really generates a lot of employment, and jobs are created if we are trading. Okay, but we will learn later. But that there's a flip side, or there's a the other side of the story is we will be discussing later, no, in terms of employment due to trade. Okay. Number four, uh, it also dictates the cost of goods and services. Okay, so because of international trade, we can say that the prices are now, I don't not I don't want to say cheaper, no, but I guess prices are now much stable. Well, some items are really cheaper now, okay, because of the opening of trade. But I guess rising prices can be controlled. No? Inflation can be controlled because of the influx of other products coming from other countries. So it can really influence the price of goods and services. Let's take into consideration the prices of cars, for example. Okay, I don't want to say cars are cheap, no, but it's quite stable. Okay, and it is because there are more competing brands today in the market. Looking at the Philippines, right? Instead of many years ago when the dominant brands were that coming from Japan, Toyota, Honda, no, and Mitsubishi. Today we have cars from Korea, from India, from China, uh, from the European Union, no, from the United States. So they're all competing in the market. So what happens is it's now more accessible to have a car, more affordable to have a car, because they have so many affordable pricing schemes. No, like down payment is only 20,000 pesos. You can bring home a brand new car. We didn't have that schemes before. Cars were very expensive. The down payment was very expensive before. But now they're competing with one another. That's why they have to come up with very attractive payment schemes, payment terms. Okay. We can also say that the quality of goods and services has improved. Thus, in a way, it's also related to price, because what happens is the you get more value for your money. Like some features of luxury sedans are now available to affordable cars, right? So they become pretty much standard to cars that are cheap. Okay, power windows, ABS, airbags. No? Before they were only available to European and luxury brand cars, but now they're pretty much standard. Okay, so you get more value for your money. You get more value for your money because there is more competition. Okay, more cars in the market. It becomes more affordable. When we import, let's say we import fruits and vegetables from abroad, no? What happens is local suppliers and producers, since they also want to make a profit, they want to compete in their market, they are forced to lower their price. Okay, So prices become more favorable to the consumer, to the masses. Okay. Of course, there are other consequences, which I know it's already on your mind, because somehow the local market will also suffer. The local producers will also suffer. But we are talking about price here now, or the effect of international trade to price. So, mamaya na tayo doon. We'll talk about that later. Okay. Okay. But as of the moment, I guess you get the idea. Okay. Because of more products coming into our country, price can become more competitive. Okay. So what was the reason why we have globalization? So these are the precursors to globalization. These were the reasons why we now have the terminology globalization and why we are experiencing it right now. Okay, number one, it is because of the advancement in transportation. So what we are looking at here, are these are actually. Oh, I'm sorry about that. Let me just go back. Okay, I want to choose the pen. Okay. Okay. So these are cargo ships. Okay, here. These are cargo ships. And what you see here are container boxes or sea containers. And sea containers contain everything. No, everything that we see in the grocery store, in the supermarket, no, are transported via container boxes and put on ships. Okay, so this advancement is groundbreaking in terms of trade, because it became a way to lower the cost of transportation. So these large ships can carry hundreds of container boxes, hundreds, and each container box can carry hundreds, even thousands of goods and commodities. So they can carry tons of products all across the globe. And these harbors here are also very special, because in many countries the harbors, the ports, are actually connected to railways. So it's easier now to transport goods and commodities directly to the cities, to the urban areas, or to wherever it is needed. It's very efficient because it's a train. No, you just have to fuel up one engine. Train has one engine, and it pulls a lot of cars containing cargo. So in one voyage, again, they can distribute a lot of goods and services. Not to mention, of course, the airplane, becoming bigger, becoming faster. They can easily carry hundreds of souls, hundreds of people in one flight. So when people travel from one country to another, they bring with them their ideas, their skills, their talents, and this is also part of globalization, the sharing of ideas, the sharing of information. Next is advancement in communication. Okay, we know very well the impact of the World Wide Web. Okay, the speed at which we can communicate today is it's outstanding. No, it's overwhelming, and it's really amazing. When I was in high school, so I graduated 1989, and if you would tell me that by 2020, that's what a couple of decades from I was high school. I wouldn't believe you if you said that you can call somebody and look at him, talk to him through a screen, real time. That's impossible. That's Buck Rogers. That's Star Trek. When I was in high school, it was pretty much those are for science fiction novels. Okay, so fiber optic cables are actually laid across the globe, under the ocean. So it's fiber optic, so the signals are it's not electrical pulses, but actually light. Nothing can beat the speed of light. So these cables carry data, carry zeros and one, represented by light signals, and that's very fast. Okay, that can easily reach the other continent. I remember my co-teacher. He was telling me that during the 80s, he worked for a computer company, and every Friday they would, at the end of the week, they would actually send documents to the United States. So he would tell me that they would spend They would stay in the office overnight just to wait for the transfer of data via, I think it was via primitive computer through the phone line, right? And yesterday, somebody sent me a book. It's 500 pages. He sent it to me through my email. It just took, I don't know, a blink of an eye. Okay. Another reason is that today, okay, governments actually today believe in the power of free trade, of international trade. So states, governments actually support free trade today. So they encourage free trade. They participate in a community of countries that trade with each other freely. And they recognize that it is the quickest path to economic growth. Okay, so many countries are opening up. And those who do not are left behind. You just look at North Korea. If you look at the map of North Korea at night, from outer space, you'll see that it's totally dark. There are no electric lights whatsoever. So that's how, they're literally, they live in the dark ages, literally. You look at Cuba. Cuba is also like that. Cuba has has been suffering the U.S. Economic embargo for a very long time. So their economic growth is stunted because they do not trade with a major economic power. That's the United States. The United States is very powerful, no? It's probably the number one trading partner of all countries. It imports a lot of things, okay? Because they really buy a lot of things from other countries. And when they stop buying from Cuba, trading from Cuba, you see the effect of this of this in the economy of Cuba. Okay, another is the desire for profit and a better standard of living. Of course, trading is selling, and behind all of this selling is, of course, the desire for acquisition of wealth. The companies who are involved in trade, they have investors, and these companies actually work to satisfy the interests of investors. And investors are interested in profit, of course. So today they realize that it's a reality, in fact, that you must accept you cannot survive if you just want to market in your own country. You must look beyond your country. If you want to be competitive, if you want to grow, you have to start selling outside of your borders. And of course, a better standard of living. Every individual desires this. Okay, so we get employed. We want to be part of a multinational company. That's part. That's becoming a participant in globalization when become employees or work for companies, for multinational companies. So many people work for companies, big companies, and if not, they even put up their own businesses. When you participate in online marketing, when you have your own Facebook business, your online store, online shop, that's also being a participant in globalization. And you like this, because it gives you income. You want to improve your way of life. Okay, so this desire pushes us, motivates us to participate in trade. Okay, so let us look into these emerging economies, the BRIC economies: Brazil, Russia, India, and China. No? So BRIC, BRIC stands for Brazil, Russia, India, and China. Because these are emerging economic powers. Okay, there's a future for this country to become very influential in the world economy. So we call them the BRIC economies. Okay, as of the moment, there are now a lot of developing nations who actually gravitate towards these countries. In other words, they want to be partners with these countries because there is a forecast, there is a projection that their economies will be very, very big, very, very progressive in the near future. Okay. So emerging economies are implementing more open trade and free market policies to compete with everyone from everywhere for everything. So these big economies are becoming the world center of economic gravity through innovation, research, and development. Okay. What's going on right now in the world economy in world trade is that there is an economic condition known as decoupling and multipolar world order. So let me discuss each. What is decoupling? What is multipolar world order? Okay, decoupling. It is a global shift in which industrialized country-dependent developing economies grow based on their own underlying economic strengths rather than those of highly developed countries. Hindi ko maintindihan, sir. Okay, so let me explain. No? To keep it simple, no? This is when a growing economy, no, a developing country, no, starts to, when we say decouple, you're trying to be detached. Okay, so you're trying to detach yourself. This country is trying to detach itself from the influence of a very, very powerful country, a very industrialized economy. So an example of this is the Philippines. The Philippines is, as of the moment, the administration is calling it a pivot, no? A pivot from Western countries or from Western influence towards other countries such as China and Russia. So we are shifting, no, towards these countries, no. So Russia and China, if you recall, are members of BRIC economies. Okay, so this is what is called as decoupling. So we are starting to realize that, oh, we cannot just rely on one country. We cannot just be dependent on one country or to a few countries. We can look to other countries. We can be partners with them as well. Now, there is also a phenomenon known as a multipolar world order. So it's a world economy in which the engines of growth are comprised of both industrialized, like the United States, and emerging economies like BRIC economies. So it's a multipolar world order. So what we're saying here is that the economies are starting to become decentralized. Okay, not as centralized as before. So when I say centralized, it's because before developing nations, no, a lot of countries tend to depend a lot on one or a few countries, namely the United States or the United Kingdom. Okay, so our economy depends on their economy. If their economies falter, our economies falter also. Okay, so many countries rely so much on their strengths. In fact, many countries before even tied their currencies with the dollar and the pound. Okay. So it was very, very polarized before, but now it's multipolar. So many countries are now trying to partner, trying to create bilateral ties with other emerging economies or economies that are very promising, like the BRIC economies. These countries part of the emerging market, no? Brazil, yeah, and Russia. Okay, what are the negative effects of globalization? So previously, I have presented you the importance of international trade, and we can say these are also the positive effects of globalization. Okay, but you know, uh, economic policies, economic theories, always it's a double-edged sword. Eh? It's a double-edged sword. In other words, there's a good side and there's a bad side. But let's discuss the other side of globalization, the negative effects of globalization. Okay, so let's see how it cuts this time, diba? So globalization cuts both ways, no? It can be a boon or a bane. So number one, job loss and stagnation of income. This is a negative effect of globalization. So think for a moment, because a while ago I was coming to this. Now I was saying that international trade creates employment, or globalization creates employment. That's one side of the story, diba? Now, the other side of the coin is that it can also be a cause for unemployment. job loss. So can you tell me how this happens? Hmm? Okay, correct. This happens because some countries, no, some companies, no, in a country realize that it's cheaper, for example, to be producing in another country. So when they do that, they transfer their facilities, their factories to that country that's much cheaper in terms of labor cost, in terms of material cost, okay, or it's much less strict to conduct business in that particular country. They're very welcome. So when they leave their country of origin, it creates job loss. Okay, because they transfer the opportunity to the host country. When you think of Apple, Apple is made where? It's it's manufactured in China, not in California. Oh, di ba? Kaya nga nagagalit si Trump. No, previously that was his battle cry when he was running for the presidency. He's going to say that American companies should manufacture in their own land. So that's what's happening. Now, because of globalization, there is opportunity now to produce at a much cheaper cost. It's much easier now to to build factories abroad. Okay. Okay. Number two, loss of control over economic policies. If you are participating in globalization, that means you become a member state of an economic group. You become a member of ASEAN. You become a member of NAFTA, of the World Trade Organization. You become, a member of these international communities, these regional communities. You become member. And when you do, you have to abide by the rules and abide by the policies that they created. Okay. So you lose some control over economic policies because you cannot just, implement certain economic rules and regulations without considering the agreements that you have with the World Trade Organization, with the IMF, World Bank, with the ASEAN, okay, with the APEC summit. You have to consider this. Okay, so you cannot just okay, I'm going to devaluate my currency. No, you can't just do that. No, sometimes you really have to consult certain agreements. So you lose control over certain economic regulations. Okay. Number three, the disappearance of old industries. Just look at Marikina, the shoe industry of Marikina. It practically disappeared. For a long time, Marikina was the shoe capital of the Philippines. Now it's not. No. Okay. And it is because of the opening of our economy. So we welcome the shoes, footwear from other countries. And they were selling at very low prices, very, very competitive prices. Some imported shoes are even much better in terms of quality and design compared to shoes made locally. So this really hurt the shoe industry in Marikina. And this is an example of how globalization can totally destroy industries. Okay, related erosion of communities. That's also true. Okay, some communities suffer, and sometimes they also totally disappear from the planet. They become extinct. Okay, if you look at some indigenous tribal communities, no, they are leaving their communities and they start migrating to urban areas, to the cities. They they wish to work there instead of remaining with their tribe, with their community. Okay, so their culture, their language, their way of life slowly disappears because of globalization. Okay, because they are so attracted with the promises of a modern lifestyle. And of course, related to that is ecological harm, which is number 5. Okay, that's the next thing, ecological harm. So sadly, no, when it comes to globalization, it seems that third world countries or developing countries are always the ones who suffer ecologically because these countries like the Philippines, no, have very poor implementation of environmental policies. We are not strict, right? And our politicians, not just our country, of course, many politicians in Africa as well are prone to corruption. When they are bribed by the companies, they turn a blind eye to the deforestation, to the natural disasters that large companies large companies do. Displacement of workers. Okay, workers are displaced because there's a desire, of course, there's a desire, I mentioned a while ago, to improve the standard of living. So what do? They look for greener pastures, they work abroad. And, uh, displacement of workers is, in a way, encouraged by developing nations. Countries who need workers also, it's very easy for them to recruit, very easy for them to advertise. It is much better for them in many cases to be hiring people from abroad because they will be able to pay them lower salaries. Overconsumption and lifestyle diseases. This is another direct effect of globalization. Uh, People become materialistic. The rise of consumerism is very rampant. We actually think that having material things will make us happy in life. We actually think that this is the trend today, no? That having a big flat screen TV, that's a necessity. Having a nice phone, that's a necessity. You must also have a car. Okay? So this is now what drives us. And number 8, it is the abandonment of culture. The negative effect of globalization is we our cultures not necessarily totally abandon it, but sometimes no, we change we are influenced by other countries. The culture of other countries actually come into our country, and we are influenced by this. We are changed. Look at just the way we eat. We dress like Koreans also. We dress like Japanese. We go trick or treating. This is because of globalization. Because globalization includes the transfer of ideas, entertainment from one country to another. We see that on television when we watch YouTube. This influences our culture. So somehow our cultures change because of globalization. Okay, so these are the negative effects of globalization. Okay, okay, class. So this is how I will end my session for today, and I do hope you've learned something. You just kindly wait for the class activity, and I will see you next meeting. You everybody have a nice day. Take care and stay at home. And I do hope you and your family remain healthy. God bless. Okay, I'll see you later.